Have you ever wondered how the overgiving of oneself, like in the form of suicidal empathy, leads to one's own destruction? How the absence of healthy boundaries around oneself or one country, as a prime example, leads to one's own self destruction? And did you know why women give empathy to both fair and unfair people, where men only give empathy to fair people? So as we're seeing, there's already, kind of a strain here where women are more likely to overgive empathy. Empathy is a right-brained activity. That's the feminine, the compassion, the nurturing, the self-reflection, the creativity, the intuition. So when a woman doesn't have healthy boundaries with self and she overgives and she's not emotionally regulated, then we can see women screaming in the street, women, doing all kinds of unhealthy things, putting herself in danger, leading to her own self-destruction. So we're going to dive into a few videos today. We're going to start with something called cry bullies. Then we're going to get into why women are more progressive. Then we're going to look at a professor who argues that speech alone is violent. Like that. Then we're going to dive into all the scientists and discuss why this happens and what we can all do to help ourselves have healthier boundaries in life, so we don't overgive of ourselves and then overgive to other people and then undergive to ourselves, leading to emotionally dysregulated people, which, we see a lot of protests, a lot of people screaming in the streets, fighting law enforcement with their bodies, and then ending up hurt or killed. So that would be an overgiving of self to one's own self-destruction in the name of, protecting your neighbor. I'm going to have suicidal empathy for my neighbor, so I might die in the process, but my empathy is more important than my life. Well, let's dive into that. So let's start with our first video, and I'll stop along the way to kind of add in my commentary. But it's a deep dive. It's probably about an hour-long video, so let's get started. So, okay, let me find the right video. Oh, here she is. Okay. Let me make it bigger, and then we'll get going. Okay, here we go.
Having previously assessed that some people act fairly and some people act unfairly, and having generalized those observations of fair versus unfair behavior to bigger personality traits like agreeableness and likability and even attractiveness, men, when they see fair people experience pain, have a rise in empathy, and when they see unfair people experience pain, do not. Women, when they see fair people experience pain, have a rise in empathy. And when they see unfair people experience pain, they also have a rise in empathy.
So women connect and men disconnect. Women are designed for emotional connection. And we're going to get into how all that operates later on in the video with cardiology and neuroscience and psychology. But just on a base level, right brain, compassion, nurturing, empathy is the emotional connection. So this is a kind of a misfire, a kind of over application of women in one sense, but also the way women kind of figure out how to move forward is by connecting emotionally and then figuring it out. Where men make a more logical decision because the left brain is logic. Okay, that's fair. So, okay, empathy. The unfair, okay, no empathy because men discern, women connect. So, and that's who we are biologically, and it's in our neurological systems. Like they've done neurological scans where it takes women about 10 to 20 times longer, depending on the topic, to go from the back of their brain when they see a new problem to make all the connections here for it to come out the executive functioning in the front of the brain, where men go right from the back to the front. That is why, from a neurological perspective, men are physiologically designed to make those quick decisions, like, and their nervous system is less robust than women, more fragile, so they can make that quicker decision. They can break quicker for the kind of protective response. It's who we are biologically, so we can't interchanging men and women for the same job and expect them to perceive and kind of respond in the identical way is lack of understanding of who men are and who women are physiologically.
So that's the big takeaway here, which is that women respond to people experiencing pain or punishment with an empathetic response, regardless of what else they know about that person, regardless of, for instance, whether punishment is justified. Whereas men, this is a small n and there will be exceptions and these are averages and all of the usual caveats apply with regard to population level truths. But men have what seems to me the normal and expected response on average, which is that when you see someone who is previously
Like,
indicated,
I'm gonna, she's obviously a scientist, but why is one normal and one not? Why can't we differentiate? Women respond normally in this way and men respond normally in the opposite way. We're here as complementary beings, not to be the same. But she's not even going to that level of complexity, which kind of keeps us in this argument of men versus women, which where have we gotten with that? Right? We've gotten population collapse with that. That's where we've gotten with that. And kind of the trail end, the downstream impact of the war of the sexes is okay, no babies. And then, well, we'll just have no sexes. But, I'm sure that won't happen. But that's the natural end of that.
a tendency to cheat, to be unfair, and you see him experiencing pain, you don't tend to have a sense of empathy towards him because it feels justified. That last bit is my interpretation, because it feels.
Yeah, exactly. The universe is a mirror. She's projecting herself into this whole situation and not able to look at it objectively. And she's a scientist, but she's a woman, so she's connecting emotionally, which is what we expect of women. Do you see the challenge with having women do science? And I'm not saying they can't do science, but here is a huge issue of a woman doing science, injecting her own challenges with men and, aligning more with men. So she's more in her masculine. She's out having a career, doing logical analysis, and less aligning with her feminine aspect, which is natural and normal for women to connect with empathy. Because emotions connect. Our souls, our energy bodies, communicate out through our hearts, as we'll learn later on today. And then there's the connection through the emotions. It's fascinating.
Justified. Now, one thing that the authors say at the very end of the paper, which is just like a little bit of a caveat for the results, is it is possible that our experimental design favored men because the modality of punishment was related to physical threat as opposed to psychological or financial threat. But then they also say, alternatively, these findings could indicate a predominant role for males in the maintenance of justice and punishment of norm violation in human societies. Which is pretty freaking bold. And the fact that they bury the lead in the title of the paper, that you can't tell that this is about sex-based differences at all. And the title of the paper is part of, presumably, I'm guessing here, how it got published in Nature at all back in 2000.
Okay, I'm going to link it below because they're going to get into a lot of stuff. But just the fact that she was shocked that they didn't lead with, they were talking about gender differences, is a shock. But there's a lot of evidence showing that there are these differences between men and women. And so when we put women in these roles where they're, not, doesn't produce the healthiest outcome, when we ask women to be in their left brain all day long in our careers, then that's our masculine. Then we overproduce testosterone. Then we don't, then we're not have a healthy access to our femininity. That was me most of my life. Now that I spend 90% of the day in my right brain, I'm in and out of enlightenment all the time. Enlightenment's an emotion. I've expanded my emotional range. I've stopped my anxiety. I'm a happy, healthy woman. But when I was in my masculine, I was kind of fighting myself all the time, asking myself to be just like a man, but physiologically, I'm a woman. So let's get into the next video, which is about why women are more progressive. And Katie, she's a fascinating woman. She's a children's advocate, and she's very knowledgeable about the mother-child bond and what's necessary in childhood. So I think we can learn a lot from her. Okay. All right. Oh, here we go.
So women are more susceptible to social contagion, right? We have these incredible pro-social behaviors. We have this natural empathy. And unfortunately, that is exploited through social media. And so women are much more likely to take on and to champion whoever they perceive to be the underdog. And the left,
it's the over caretaking, because women connect, whether we want to or not. It's who we are physiologically. We connect emotionally. And so, oh, what emotion are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling it too. Let's connect. And then we, kind of work through the challenge. This is who women are.
kind of traffics all of their bad ideas under the guise of protecting the underdog. I saw this picture. I'm not even super familiar with UK politicians, but it was this row of MPs who are all women who defended or tried to obstruct investigations into the Muslim rape gangs.
Really?
It was all women. Yeah, all female MPs.
How could they do that to working class girls in their own country?
Do that? It is because they have been conditioned to believe that they need to protect the underdog or the vulnerable, which they have been told are foreigners or foreign men. And it's so fascinating because Jordan Peterson, who was he on with? Joe Rogan, I think. And they were talking about.
I mean, this is classic suicidal empathy. They're hiding the rapes. They're not prosecuting. They're letting them out of jail. And we're seeing the same challenges here of all the people fighting against the removal of the illegal immigrants, especially the criminals. It's the overextension of empathy because women who don't have an ability to regulate their emotions in a healthy way overgive their emotions. Like a man who overgives himself works 100, 120 hours a week and barely rests, and that's a physicality, an overgiving of his physicality. Well, women are the emotional center physiologically. That's who we are as feminine women. And so when we overgive emotionally. And who do we resonate with the most? We attract what we are. So women are the more vulnerable sex. So then, it's logical that we kind of resonate and have empathy for the most perceived vulnerable beings and who we're taught are the most vulnerable. So let's keep going.
Women are wired to give, right? It is in us to nurture and to soothe and to comfort and take care of and fight anybody that would ever dare to threaten our infant. Women that don't have a baby to care for, they will find a baby to care for. But Jordan's like, not everything that cries is a baby. Sometimes things that cry are monsters.
But just to tease that out for a moment.
Yeah.
We're talking about abused English girls.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that these people, I mean, there's a lot of evidence for it in Britain,
Yes.
have favoured, let's be blunt about this, mainly Pakistani Islamic men who have behaved with a brutality that ought to have every woman in the country tearing the place down until there's a proper investigation and justice done on behalf of those marginalised and unfortunately.
And then people are getting arrested for hate speech in Europe because they're saying, oh, well, you're racist. It's racist to say that Pakistani men are raping women because you're identifying a group that's coming in illegally. That's kind of the government's position. And so it's an Orwellian state where there's no freedom of speech in Europe and people are getting arrested for this, even though there's tons of rape going on and crime. And I mean, it's terrible. And it's mostly single men coming. These immigrants.
Vulnerable young British girls.
Yep.
Where's our moral compass gone?
Yeah.
What does the matter with these people?
I think though that picture was so emblematic as to the massive worldview split between men and women. because women are so much more easily captured by the ideals of progressivism that couch everything in empathy for the oppressed. And you need to take care of the people that are oppressed. They just call the wrong people oppressed. You're empathizing with the wrong group. You shouldn't be empathizing with the Pakistani men that are targeting and grooming young white women, very often with religious undertones to it. You should be protecting the girls themselves. So I just think that one of the reasons for the worldview split is young men and young women are following different people. That young men are being much more, thankfully, I would say, discipled and persuaded by men who are, in many cases, telling them to man up and be protectors and providers. And unfortunately, young women are following accounts or ideas that tell them that they need to empathize with people who very often are victimizers themselves.
Yeah. Wow. So let's go into the last video I have about this woke professor talking about how speech is violent. It's like, and then why that's a problem, because that gets into cancel culture. And then that'll lead us into our first scientist, Dr. Andrew Huberman, who talks about why cancel culture is a short-term solution to an internal problem. And so it's never going to work in the long run. But let's hear Michael Knowles kind of discuss this at a university. And they want to just shut down the whole conversation because they're saying it's racist. Well, we're going to learn in a little bit when we get into science how the universe is a mirror, showing us ourselves in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. Okay, we live in a holographic universe. Dr. Joe Dispenza is going to explain that to us in a second after we get into this video. So, and we're going to turn everything on its head and learn about why this is all happening. Okay. Here we go.
When this liberal snowflake claimed that speech is violence, Michael Knowles made her regret her words instantly.
Hello. You cited a list of statistics in your talk which you claim support the idea that illegal immigrants are dangerous or criminals.
I cited a number of statistics that show that they commit federal crimes at a significantly higher rate than native-born Americans. Yeah.
Okay. So what role do you think that structural racism and inherent bias has to play in those statistics?
I don't think that the people who enter this country illegally are forced to do so by some sort of systemic racism. There's no systemic American racist going down to El Salvador and saying, you better get up and sneak into the United States. And there's nobody in the United States who forces people who come here illegally to commit crimes.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the fact that I'm faculty here. I also support protester in the back.
What do you support specifically? Do you think that anti-immigrant rhetoric is violent free speech?
Yes, because of the reasons
you think that speech is violence?
No, I think that
that's what that sign says.
The conversation that you're having is oppressive, and
so I am oppressive.
See, again, the oppressive. The speech is oppressive. So you can't even have freedom of speech of a debate because someone might get hurt. Someone might get oppressed. Someone's feelings might get hurt. So as opposed to teaching adults to take responsibility for their feelings, we want to cancel things on the outside to protect the inside. But we live in a holographic universe proven by physicists. So the outside is a projection of the inside. So controlling the outside to change the inside, it goes against how reality is created. Our external reality is a reflection of our internal reality. So if someone gets triggered by an external reality, that means they have internal work to do and not the other way around.
People by what I'm doing. So I am exerting violence on people by my speech. That means that you, a faculty member at an American public university paid for by taxpayer dollars, are conflating speech with violence.
Yes, speech can be violent. What you are saying contributes to systemic racism in this country. It means that my students of color are pulled over and accused of stealing a car when they did not.
I'm not pulling anybody over for stealing any cars. I see many people
did.
of many different races in this room. They all seem to be doing just fine. I don't think any of them have felt violence because they listened to a lecture on basic facts about our immigration system.
Are you there to ask us if we felt violence, or are you just assuming that we haven't?
No, I haven't asked because no violence has been committed on you. Because violence is not a subjective feeling. Violence is an objective fact.
When this liberal
violence, he's right. Violence is an objective fact. If I shoot someone, that's violent. If I hit someone with a hammer, that's violent. If I hit someone, that's violent. Saying you're stupid is not violent. That's not violent. It might hurt your feelings, but if I say the same words to 10 different people, some people might get hurt and some people won't. That's why it's subjective. But if I shoot 10 people will get hurt. That's why it's not subjective. It's an objective reality. But when we conflate emotions with action, because we have no idea how to regulate ourselves, we never learned in our childhood, then this is the natural end ground to, to this challenge. Wow. Okay, let's start with Dr. Andrew Huberman, who gets into why cancel culture does not solve the problem of being emotionally regulated. These people, well, I feel, okay? And where does this come from, the I feel, right? Okay, sorry, I have a lot of things. Here he is, great.
What we need to do is start to figure out how we can, I think, especially for the next generation of kids, how to teach them to regulate their nervous system so that they recognize that pulse of adrenaline as placing them in a compromised position.
So someone can feel a pulse of adrenaline from speech, but that could be because they had a hugely traumatic childhood, and doesn't mean that that speech is not going to necessarily hurt them. It's just how their nervous system is regulated in their traumatic childhood, environment. When someone said something like that, it meant something else was coming. But that's not equal to that's how it works in the outside world when you're at a speech with a professor up on the stage. That professor's not hitting people. Okay?
Like, we have to leverage the idea that being able to hear and listen hinges on the ability to be calm. So therefore, the ability to be calm is crucial to hearing and listening is crucial to our advancement as individuals and as groups. The problem is everyone's been trying to do this backwards. They've said we all have to get along. We have to cancel culture. We all have to, listen to one another. And I think, again, we have to start from the inside. We have to teach it physiologically. Now, I don't have a master plan on how to do that, but one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons I'm, teaching neuroscience on Instagram and not just in my laboratory is until we can learn to regulate the self, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go as a culture. But
yeah, this is what needs to happen. People need to learn how to regulate themselves so we can have conversations with different views and not feel attacked. Okay, when someone's triggered, I had to learn that. I'm 55 now. I started healing 10 years ago. But when someone's triggered, that means their emotional pain, their own emotional pain comes to the surface. They can see themselves. And Carl Jung said, everything that irritates you about other people leads you to an understanding of self for wholeness. So stopping someone like Michael Knowles, have you watched Michael Knowles? Like the jazz guy, like the man's not violent, I can tell you. I've attracted violent men into my life. I attracted Andrew Tate into my life. It's in my book. Okay, and then 2 Fire Academy instructors, 164, 167, all led me back to my guy from my childhood, who's former special agent in charge of the FBI, currently the head of global security at GoDaddy, like Air Force Academy. Okay? I understand men who can, hold a boundary and are over 6 feet tall and can do the protecting, That's not Michael Knowles. He does his protecting in other ways. He's not a violent man. But let's start with how this works, that we live in a holographic universe. And we're going to rely on Albert Einstein, who said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The energy field is the sole governing agency of the body. And the field, the scientific field of epigenetics, which will be our next video, is going to talk to us about why that's true as well. So let's start with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Einstein said the field, the wave, the energy is the sole governing agency of the particle. Energy controls matter. He didn't say particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. If you change the information in the field, can you change the projection, the particle in three-dimensional reality? This is a holographic universe.
So he's saying the same thing as Dr. Andrew Huberman. The energy can change the particle. So if the particle is the body, you got to change the energy that is controlling that body, not a different energy outside of yourself. When we ask people to cancel themselves outside of themselves when they're just speaking a different point of view, that shows how emotionally immature the person is and lack of internal regulation of self, like Dr. Andrew Huberman was discussing. We used to be able to talk like this. Why can't we talk like this anymore? Women are so overburdened. When we ask women to be men and get jobs, we stopped giving women time to process their emotions, so they repressed their emotions, they controlled their emotions, and then, we live in a holographic universe. The universe is a mirror, so then they projected the control outward, and that's what they're perceiving is, I need to control, and there's cancel culture. But healthy feminine women aren't controlling their emotions. They know how to move through their emotions. And we weren't having this problem before with cancel culture. But we have it now because we've controlled women. And we're going to learn a lot more about why that's a problem. So let's get into our next video about epigenetics. And epi means before genetics. And so this shows us how important the field is. And that's our energy bodies, our souls. And so this is a fascinating one. Dr. Bruce Lipton, The Power of Epigenetics.
Whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain releases complementary chemistry that matches that picture, and it releases it into the body. And the chemistry of the blood is what controls the genes and the behavior. Children, when adopted into a family where there's cancer running in that family, the adopted child will get the same family cancer. But the point, the adopted child has totally different genetics. What was the point? It was being adopted into a family where the programming of that child is what caused the cancer. It's consciousness who releases the chemistry to the environment that controls the genes. And you can change your consciousness, and you can change your environment. And all of a sudden I said, oh my God, we were programmed to be victims.
We were programmed to be victims. Oppressor, oppressee, external locus of control. Like it's a Christian worldview is what it is. Like when you have an external locus of control, then we're subservient and we don't have autonomy over ourselves. So we blame other people for our problems. But when we have an internal locus of control, our inner authority, and we accept that our souls, our energy bodies, and our souls plan our lives as a way for self-improvement. My soul planned my lives based on my wounds for all my self-improvement opportunities. And all of our souls are constantly communicating. We'll get into that in a second.
It turns out we are masters of our genetic activity. And this is the new science called epigenetics. Whatever picture you...
So, wow, I just love him. So, do I have one more to show? I can't, let me look real quick. Okay. No, yeah. Okay. Let me pull up part of my webinar that I go where I get into my how to heal. And we're going to go into how this works, that the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, that we live in a holographic universe, that the heart is a vortex. Wow, right? When I learned that, I'm like, oh, it's so perfect because a vortex, you can't command a vortex. A vortex projects outward like a black hole. So it's the same truth that the universe is a mirror. Okay. All righty. Let me bring this up. There. Let me present. Right. So, did I? Yeah, I'm sharing. Okay, great. So let's start over here, the laws of physics. So the physicists has proven that we all have energy bodies, and we're going to see that in a video in a minute. But I'm leaning on the work of Dr. David R. Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, and I believe Letting Go. But in this map of consciousness, he shows all of the emotions, or large of the emotions, and on the left is the hertz that the emotions vibrate at. When I saw this, I'm like, oh, okay, so we're energy bodies, And that means laws of physics, because how do you understand energy? You study physics. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So if I understand the laws of physics, I can understand how our souls operate. Because when you rely on the wisdom, the knowledge that the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, the field being the energy field, the soul, the particle being the body, if I can learn how to operate my soul in healthy ways and spend more time in love, peace, and enlightenment instead of fear, guilt, and shame, then I'm going to be, have a regulated nervous system, and I can have these conversations, and I won't be constantly asking people to change outside of me because I don't know how to control myself emotionally. I don't know how to regulate my own emotions. So what I had to accept is that all of this is necessary because we're an energy body, and fluctuating energy is alive energy. So we have to surrender to our fear, guilt, and shame. There's the feminine, the surrender, so that we can do the work, turning that wound into wisdom, and then pull that wisdom out and climb our next mountain. And there's the action. There's the masculine. So with the universe being a mirror, we're going to watch this tuning fork resonance experiment in a second. Let's say that selfishness, I have selfishness in my soul and it resonates at, say, 30 hertz. Okay. How it works is based on the laws of physics. When my 30 hertz moves, other souls with 30 hertz also move, pulling my attention, pulling my perception. And then an unaware person would say, "You're selfish." But what's really going on at a soul level is my soul is showing me the selfishness inside of my own soul so that I can change, I can grow, I can become more emotionally mature. Because if shame resonates at 30 hertz, love here resonates at 500 hertz. If I'm sitting there in my 30 hertz, I don't even notice the 500 hertz. And we're going to see that here in a second. So let's watch this and I'll show you how this works. So first we have 512 hertz and 440 hertz. They don't even notice each other. Like the 30 hertz and the 500 hertz don't notice each other. But when the hertz are the same or identical, then they move each other, pulling perception, and there's attraction. We have energy. That's alive. That's life there. So that's where I need to engage. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Let me shut this down. Oops. Let me stop sharing. So when there's, selfishness on the inside of me and selfishness in somebody else, then that is my soul showing me myself. Like if you go see the same movie with your best friend, what your best friend resonates with, meaning a vibrational match, an energetic match, resonating in the same hertz, is not going to be identical to you because your souls are not identical. So what pulls your best friend's perception and attention, what your best friend is attracted to, will be a mirror to what's inside their soul, and what you're attracted to will be a mirror to what's inside of your own soul. Both valid, but both different because you're not identical. So we have our energy bodies, and our energy bodies are, and the more like fear, guilt, and shame we have in our energy bodies, then on our physical bodies will hold more fear, guilt, and shame. So when our nervous systems and our energy bodies calibrate our nervous system via our hearts, the neurological system in our hearts is far more complex than our brains. And our hearts send about 90% more signals to our brains than the other way around. So when your heart comes into coherence and is emotionally regulated, that regulates the whole nervous system. You heard heart and soul. So our souls communicate out through our hearts, and the electromagnetic field around the heart is 5,000 times stronger than the brain per Dr. Joe Dispenza. And the heart's a vortex. So let's get into how the heart is a vortex, and we'll keep talking about how the universe is a mirror, and you can use that to change and heal yourself, just like Dr. Andrew Huberman said. We need to regulate the self so that we can have a stable society. A stable society is not created by canceling parts of it. It's created by creating healthy, emotionally regulated human beings. And regulation, that's feminine work, but we set women to have careers, so no one's at home doing the emotional work, and we wonder why we have a mental health crisis. Right? With kids, 40 to 60% of kids, based on different studies, do not have a secure attachment to self, and the same is mirrored in the adult population, meaning they're mentally ill because they never learned how to process their emotions. And so they live in this fear, guilt, and shame in their nervous system, in their bodies, and they disconnect from their bodies. They don't want to be there. And then there's the addiction, there's the overgiving, there's the I hate myself, and projecting hate and not understanding it. That was me for a long time. Okay, let's get into how the heart is a vortex. And I just love this one of my favorites.
Let me just read this because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is false. It has always been false. And the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refuse to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance.
So it was Nikola Tesla who said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And we're about to learn something fascinating about how blood flows.
Blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge.
The field is the sole governing agency of the particle, blood being the particle.
The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you.
This is why it's important for humans to spend time in nature and admit that we need those connections to the sun and to the earth, that we're in relationship with the sun and the earth. But when we believe a Christian worldview that we dominate over, that leads us to a lot of self-destruction. A lot of self-destruction.
It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it.
Yeah, it's a signal going out. And physicists have proven that we're all energy bodies connected through our hearts, because our heart is what communicates, not our brain. As we just saw, that huge field that's created out through our hearts. And this is evidenced by, you've seen countless videos of dogs getting super excited 1 or 2 minutes before their owner comes home every single day. Well, how do they know the owner's coming home? Communicate through our hearts. We're all communicating constantly.
It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain.
Right. The heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know this. So why aren't they teaching us that the heart is a vortex, which is like as powerful like a black hole. Why do they want us to think that the heart just pumps? It's the gaslighting. When you say, oh, well, that means you're gaslighting with fear, guilt, and shame. Keep humans small. God's in control. You're subservient. The heart, just pumping blood. No, it's the facilitating a vortex inside of each human, because we live in a holographic universe and the universe is a mirror showing us ourselves. So each human's vortex projects their feelings outward, and then that hits the boundary of their energy, and what resonates with other people is what they're attracted to, and that's how we see ourselves.
They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system.
Right, coherence in the heart, because our emotions are controlled through our hearts. And when we know how to regulate our emotions, we have control over the self, like Andrew Huberman was talking about. So when I have control over myself, I can have conversations with people with, completely opposite views of me, because I'm not constantly getting triggered because my emotional pain keeps coming to the surface. I've done the emotional work. I have reparented myself. I recalibrated my nervous system to resonate with love, compassion, and enlightenment instead of fear, guilt, and shame. And how does that work? When my energy field spends most of its time in love, compassion, and enlightenment, my nervous system is as well, because the field is the sole governing agency of the particle.
So why are they still teaching children a 400-year-old guess from William Harvey that has never been updated?
Excellent question. But that's my answer to it, is that we're not ready to let go of this Christian worldview. But this Christian worldview of an external locus of power is what creates these subservient people, the oppressor, oppressee. And then we have the woke professor. Then we have the woman still arguing between men and women that we saw in the first video. So I have done a deep dive in ChatGPT, like a Jungian analysis of what we can do about it, how we can address this topic called suicidal empathy. Let me find my ChatGPT here. Okay. All right. So there's a book called Suicidal Empathy by God Saad. It's fascinating. So I highly recommend it. And that's kind of where I got this idea. So a Jungian, Carl Jung, analysis of suicidal empathy by God Saad would not focus on whether Saad is politically right or wrong. Jung would ask instead, what archetypal forces are constellated in this argument? What psychic imbalance is being named, and what shadow material is being projected? Shadow means our fear, guilt, and shame. The kind of the wounds inside of our subconscious are being projected externally, unknowingly, so that we can see ourselves. Hence the, speech is violence and you're racist. That's the fear, guilt, and shame that someone holds, because our hearts communicate our emotions and how we feel about ourselves externally so that we can see ourselves for self-improvement opportunities. It's not a takedown of somebody else. So Saad's central claim is that excessive empathy without healthy boundaries, especially like the second video talked about, especially in Western societies, leads to civilizational self-destruction, which we're seeing in the extreme immigrant crisis in Europe, or in our own country in America. The lack of healthy boundaries at the border, letting in all kinds of murders and rapists and all these drugs coming in because we feel bad for them. Why is, feeling for people who aren't Americans in our own home country more important than ourselves? Well, there's the overgiving of self. There's the lack of healthy boundaries. There's the dysregulated nervous system. There's the immature, lack of self-aware behavior that is typical of people who haven't healed from their childhood wounds. So in Jung's typology, the arrows, connection, feeling, merging, logo, structure, differentiation, rational boundary, when one dominates, imbalance occurs. So connection, feeling, and merging is not in balance with structure, differentiation, and rational boundary. The feminine and the masculine are out of balance. It's over feminized and under-masculinized, kind of a knee-jerk reaction to what people call the patriarchy. So a cultural over-identification with the mother principle and a repression of the father principle. Okay, suicidal empathy as devouring mother archetype. Makes sense, right? So, I mean, if the young girls are getting raped like they are in the UK, then why aren't they stopping immigration? Why are, young men from Muslim countries more important than the young women in England? Jung described a distorted form of the mother archetype, over-permissive, boundaryless, smothering, sacrificing self-preservation for unconditional inclusion. I said that's Europe all the way right now. In its shadow form, the great mother becomes the devouring mother, consuming structure in the name of nurturance. From this lens, Saad's argument could be seen as a reaction to what he perceives as an overactivated maternal archetype at the cultural level. 100%, that's what's going on in Europe. We're stopping it here in America, but, we see these women using their bodies to confront law enforcement and then getting killed. Going there with criminal intent and then wondering why, or taking children to a protest where there's guns and, what is it, the pepper spray. Children. The young would immediately ask, what shadow is constellated in the critique? When someone attacks empathy as dangerous, it may also reflect fear of vulnerability, over-identification with strength, inflation of rational superiority, rejection of feeling. So in Jungian terms, the critic of empathy may be possessed by an exaggerated logos principle, which I would say that's the patriarchy. And the psyche swings between opposites. But when the psyche is in a human being that is emotionally regulated, then healthy boundaries naturally pop up. We don't go too far one way or too far the other way. So Jung believed Western civilization struggles to integrate rational enlightenment values, logos, with religious moral compassion traditions, eros. If a society leans too far into unbounded empathy, it risks loss of structure, which we've seen in America, and in Europe. Cold rationalization, it risks cruelty and dehumanization. I mean, we did that with the Spanish Crusades. The Spanish Inquisition killed millions because they're heretics, or the Manifest Destiny, where we killed 60 million buffalo, all the beavers and the wolves, and then the salmon with all the dams. And we did that to kill the Native Americans. So we've swung both ways. We're like, it's like a teeter-totter. We're trying to figure out, our balance here. So true individuation requires holding both. So a Jungian critique of suicidal empathy would not dismiss the concern about boundaries, but would question whether the solution risks overcorrecting into rigidity. So, all right, okay. Empathy itself in Jungian terms. Is empathy conscious or bounded? Or is it sentimental and archetypally inflated? So I would say, no boundaries, or even in Spain, they said, well, we don't like the right-wing views because they're racist, so we're going to let in new people and then they're going to vote left, and so then we're going to weed out all of the native Spanish people who are more right-wing. That I would say that's a bit inflated. Healthy empathy acknowledges limits, maintains differentiation, and balances care with structure. Letting in 500,000 immigrants, and you see the line, it's all men, right? So that you can cancel native Spanish people because you don't agree with them. That's cancel culture in its profound sense. You can't even, this is like not rational behavior. Why aren't they're from Spain. You see what I'm saying? Unconscious empathy merges without boundaries. Just everybody come into the country, avoids conflict, collapses into guilt. The problem is not empathy. The problem is unconsciousness. They're not conscious of their behavior because they're acting from wounds and not wisdom. When you act from a wound, you pull out inverted wisdom. And here's an example. Several years ago, I had an argument with my youngest daughter. She was like 16, and I was wrong, and I needed to apologize. But the apology just was blocked. It wouldn't come out of me. So I asked myself, I said, why can I apologize? And myself told me, you believe that if you apologize, your loved ones will leave you. Like, that's not logical. It's not logical that my loved ones would leave me. But that's the unconsciousness. That's the wound. When I inverted it into wisdom, when I apologize, my loved ones will want to stay. But that wound was in my subconscious, and I was unaware of it until my late 40s. And so I was operating from that wound in my soul. This is why we all need to learn how to operate our souls. So the West is at a stage of archetypal conflict. Neither total empathy nor total hardness leads to wholeness. Yeah, and that's the goal is wholeness. The goal is coherence between the right brain and the left brain, is heart coherence. That's wholeness. So in like Native American traditions, when they look at resolving trauma, they engage the right brain communication and the left brain action. But in the Western culture, it's mostly talk therapy. That's just the right brain. So then we have this huge plethora of therapists and psychologists, but we also have a massive mental health crisis. Well, if we have so many therapists that know what they're doing, why do we still have a mental health crisis? Doesn't make any sense. So the solution is conscious integration of opposites. He would caution against demonizing empathy, demonizing strength, identifying wholly as either pole. Like the woman in the beginning, she started criticizing and injecting her own self because she was getting triggered. She hasn't done the internal work, and started to kind of project like, well, maybe don't listen to it, or maybe don't, the kind of the beginning of the cancel culture mindset. So here's the final summary. From a Jungian perspective, suicidal empathy can be seen as a cultural anxiety about archetypal imbalance, a reaction against perceived overactivation of the maternal principle, a call for reassertion of boundaries and structure, which is what's happening, but also potentially an over-identification with logos and warrior energy. The deeper issue is not empathy itself, it is unconscious in how archetypal forces operate within a civilization. So I just, thought I'd share that this is what's going on. And, we're all learning how to regulate ourselves, like Dr. Andrew Huberman said. And when we see that what we are attracted to outside of ourselves to show us something inside of ourselves, the universe is a mirror, we use that wisdom for self-reflection, then we have an opportunity to turn our wounds into wisdom. I have a free ebook linked below that will help you with all these self-reflection techniques so that you can turn more of your wounds into wisdom and be much more regulated inside of yourself. Please like and subscribe. Thank you. Take care. Bye.